We've we've hit on it some already, but I am curious what in for those listening who have a Christian background or who want to use tools from the Christian tradition to help them find healing, to help them move through the trauma that they've suffered. What in the Christian tradition or Franciscan or the Franciscan tradition for that matter can help us on that journey toward becoming wounded healers?
Well, I think that prayer helps in whatever way the person is comfortable. I won't necessarily tell somebody this is how you need to pray, because they need to find their own way there. With all the various trauma victims that I've dealt with, some of them have tremendous faith, and so not to be willing to turn to that as a resource, even if it involves doubts and anger and so on and so forth. And then I think the other thing that our Christian tradition offers to us, well, two things really. One is forgiveness. We have a strong tradition of forgiveness, and Jesus emphasized that. Jesus lived that. And that's forgiving others and forgiving ourselves, which in many ways is even more difficult. But I think our Christian tradition, our Catholic tradition can help with that. Just knowing that it's there, that's one of the things that we're called to. And then that we're called to learn how to love ourselves. And all this judgment about, I'm stupid, that was a stupid thing for me to do, and so that's not loving. I mean, I've dealt with people that have said those kind of things to themselves. I remember one time, actually, I was dealing with a person who was a priest, and he was having some trouble with sexual issues, okay? And I thought, okay, and he was just judging himself up and down and left and right, and I'm terrible and I'm a hypocrite. I said, well, tell me this, Father, when somebody comes to you, young teenage boy comes to you, or a married man or whatever, and confesses to that same sin, is this what you say to him? Well, you're disgusting, shame on you. And he went, oh, heavens, I would never say anything like that. I thought, well, then what's the deal? So I think, that whole emphasis on facing our sins, if you will, or our failings or whatever, and learning to forgive ourselves the way we would forgive somebody else, I think is something that our Christian tradition is very, very strong on, as well as learning to love ourselves.
Yeah, I remember a great quote from Life of the Beloved by Henry Nouwen. He says something along the lines of self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life because it contradicts the reality that you are the
Right,
beloved.
right, right.
Why is a clinical psychologist, like, why are we as humans, not everyone, but generally most people I meet are very, very hard on themselves?
Right,
And
right.
it's so easy for self-rejection to creep up. Why are we like that as humans?
Well, some people would say, without getting into Freudian kind of stuff, some people would say, well, it has its roots in our childhood, which is true. The psychologist Carl Rogers talked about conditions of worth. And what he meant by that was that in the normal course of raising a child, we'll say, don't do that. That's a dumb thing to do. Don't do that. Well, then we'll translate that in our little head to I'm dumb.
Mm,
Being loved by somebody feels conditional. Well, my parents only love me when I'm behaving myself. That may not be objectively true, but that's how the child kind of processes it. So, we move forward with that, with these, what Rogers called conditions of worth, and it turns into some judgment of self. And you're right. Um, I mean, in many ways, that's one of the hardest things to help people break through is just that self-judgment. But what strikes me and what I will ask people is, would you say that to somebody else? Invariably, it's not. It's stuff that we would never say. If I think to myself, yeah, you're stupid, you're weak, what's the matter with you? You're worthless. Who are you kidding? So ever say, well, Patterson, do you say that to other people? No.
yeah. Do you say that to your children? Do you say
Yeah,
that to
I
your
never
best
would say
friend?
that
Do
to
you,
them. Good
do you say
grief.
that to your spouse? Yeah.
No, I never would. But
Yeah.
somehow or other, And so sometimes it's a question of just, and it's so insidious. Sometimes we don't even know it's there until we pay
Mm,
attention to it a little bit. It's like I used to say to people, you have a little Adolf Hitler on your shoulder there, and he's whispering these nasty things into your head, but you don't challenge them.
yeah.
And that's the other thing that comes up. Sometimes I will say to people, suppose somebody walked up to you and said, you're really stupid, and called you a stupid expletive. How would you react to that? Well, I get mad. I'd say, no, I'm not. I said, well, how about this thing on your shoulder? How come you never fight back with that? Okay.
Wow. It's so true. That's so true.
So sometimes we just have to become aware of it and then challenge it a little bit, which is I know this isn't what we're focused on, but it's also one of the areas where journal writing can help. We'll write down these negative things and challenge them. Okay, well, I believe I'm stupid. Well, is there any evidence to support that? Well, I've done some stupid things, but I have an advanced degree and have written some stuff and so on. So I'm obviously not completely stupid, and just challenging the thought.
I wanted to ask you about a recent piece that you had in the St. Anthony Messenger.
Right,
And this beautiful piece, and it's based around the Beatitudes. And in the context of this conversation, I was wondering if you have any thoughts on how the Beatitudes may assist us in healing, in mourning, in
right,
grieving, in becoming wounded healers, as we keep coming back to.
right. Well, I think that in terms of trauma in particular, I mean, there's blessed are they who mourn, because I think mourning and grief is an integral part of recovery from trauma. It's been said, and I agree with it, that a person doesn't go through combat without grieving, because they have lost somebody, they've lost somebody that they've known. The people that I dealt with, the clergy abuse people, they grieved the loss of their faith as they had it, okay? Because that was part of what some of these people played on to get them to do these things. And there are all kinds of other situations. Things happen. It's the nature of life, and we have to grieve. We have to face that grief. But the thing about grieving that I would want your listeners to know especially is that there's no correct way to do it. A lot of people, I mean, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a wonderful person and she helped a lot of people, but she herself never said, I didn't mean those 5 stages of grief to be taken as a literal thing. I was just trying to articulate different types of experiences. Because I've had people come in and say, well, I don't know that I bargained, or I don't know that I've been angry, and maybe I'm not doing this correctly. And I mean, that's summed up for me. There was this wonderful person that I dealt with some years ago, beautiful faith-based lady, and she had lost her husband of 50 odd years. And so she came in, and I was asked her, well, how are you doing? She said, well, she belonged to a small church that had been very supportive, very gathered around her, very loving. And she said, she really appreciated that, but many of them have given me books about grief. And then she pointed, she said, I have a small stack of them. And she, of course, was very compliant. And she said, and I've read them all. It was about 15 books on grief. I said, what do you think? She said, I'm completely confused. She said, one book will tell me to give my husband's belongings away right away. Another book will tell me keep them as long as I want to. And on and on and on. So you know what I did? I gave her a book to read.
Here's your 16th book.
Absolutely. But what I gave her was A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, which was really his journal for the first year after he lost his wife. It's a beautiful book. There's no easy answers. And at the end of the book, it's not like after the year of grieving, it's not like, okay, I'm done, I'm fine. It's very clear he's going to grieve the loss of his wife, Joy, for the rest of his life, okay? So I recommended that book to this lady. She loved it. She came back a week later and said, I loved that book. It gave me permission to just deal with this the way that I'm dealing with it. So that's right.
Yeah.
So, there's we have to be aware of it. We have to be open to it. I've always said that grief is sneaky. I can be thinking I'm doing fine. I'll give you a brief example. I had an aunt when I was growing up that was an integral part of our family. She was a great student of the Civil War. And so maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was rewatching. I decided I wanted to rewatch Ken Burns' series on the Civil War. And I started watching that and I thought, oh man, Aunt Dorothy would have loved this. And I got emotional, okay? Because it put me in touch with that grief over the loss of someone whom I really loved. And so, people will complain about that. I thought I was doing fine, but then I heard this song and I started weeping. Well, that's the nature of grief. It can sneak up on you. And so the things about grief that I think are helpful to accept is, one, there's no correct way to do it. And two, it never really goes away. I mean, you lost your mom. I lost my mom 30 years ago. Okay. Mother's Day is still a tough day. Okay. It's still a tough day. Do I feel as deeply hurt as the day that I got the call that she died or the day of her funeral? No, no. But do I still grieve that loss? You bet. You bet I do. And I think that's good when people can just accept that there's no correct way and that it never really goes away completely. And the fact that I may get sad about the death of my mother 30 years ago doesn't mean I've not dealt with something. It just means that's the nature of grieving.
Yeah, and that you're human.
Yeah, and that we're human.
You're
and
a
that
human being who loves. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's it's the grief is the price tag you pay for loving. I remember dealing with a different lady who had lost her husband, and she was just really, really in anguish about it. It had been a sudden death, and they were very close. And I said to her, well, suppose we had a time machine, okay? Suppose you could get in that time machine and go back to when you first met your husband, and instead you turned and you walked away. Would you do that? And she just laughed and said, I'd never do that because I would have missed out on all those years we had together. And I said, yeah, and this is the price tag.